John. Hey, you taking a piss, bro? Oh yeah, vibes. Vibes. John. Are you fucking? Are you asleep? Are you asleep? Vibes. Hey, what the fuck are you doing over there? Vibes. John. Are you fucking nuts, bro? What are you doing? You taking a piss? I could have swore I heard you taking a piss, you sick bastard. What the fuck are you doing? Why do you look at these are the recordings of the lives I get all day. I get these recordings. You taking a piss. It's quite disgusting. What are you doing? Why do you start a live? And then why do I gotta get a recording of it later? Of you taking a piss? Well, why are you on here then? That's my point. Why are you on a live? What am I modding? There's no one here. What the fuck are you talking about? All right, yeah. The topic today is nothing. Why you? So you can't sleep, so you start a live. I'm not talking about circumcision by myself, motherfucker. What you want? Practical application? You want me to whip out my camera? More like a seahorse. Bro, what are you doing, Ice? I mean, fucking vibes. Jesus Christ, I'm not modding this shit. You fucking nuts, bro. Whoa. Shit. What the fuck are you doing? What the hell? I was just coming to check to see what you're doing, but you're just sleeping. I'm here to complain that I have to get recordings of this shit every day. 3-minute fucking lives and shit. Let's see what I can do with this. Yep. Vibes can't sleep, so he starts a live. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but either way. Yeah, see, at least this way, it'll be interesting. Bro, you crazy, man. I mean, I really think you are nuts, bro. Let me see here. I wonder if you can play fucking... Oh, all right, let's go back to here. No, no videos. They need to start a video application where you can just run a video. You the mod. Fucking hilarious, bro. I can't talk right now, brother. You the mod. I should just do a fucking live on that shit specifically. How people get away with having lives without having to be live. They're just unalived. This should be called an unalive. Uncle Moose. All right, we had one in here. I wouldn't have stuck around either, Uncle Moose. I've been like, yo, man, this unalive is very uninteresting. Oh, that's a good one. There you go. There we put it. What? Shrank me? Why'd you shrink me? You got shrinkage? I couldn't believe you were pissing, bro. You were pissing on a live. And that's not to say like the English verbiage. Oh, come on, man. Oh. Check it out. This is the, read this one. This is a list. This is the actual list from the search. Let me see here. Exhibit H, a list of items, splinters of wood and nails. Search cannot identify 1BA70 as Clotilda. What the hell? Yeah, as Clotilda. So this is everything that they found in 2019 on the wreckage that was so-called Clotilda that they built a $1.3 million museum for. That's just one of the museums. So, what's his name? I forget the reporter's name. He wanted to get a lot of fame. So, he went out and looked for the Clotilda and claimed that this wreckage that he found underwater, we got to understand this was right before they had already made plans, city plans to turn Plateau, Alabama, on the Mobile River. There was $1 million deals going on before Plateau was turned into what's it called, Africa Town, which had nothing to do with Africa. So he claimed that he found a boat and said, okay, this is it. So they went down there, pulled up some literally splinters of wood, and then got $1.3 million from the millions of dollars that were already invested in making Plateau into Africa Town. Because if it doesn't become Africa Town, then it has no reason for those multi-million-dollar deals going down. So they're trying to save. Basically, what this comes down to is a bunch of YTs. They're like, hey, we want to make some money off of this narrative that is called slavery. So what's the best thing you could do? You could promote. Promotions is what it's all about. You should look up Edward Bernays, 1940s, the tobacco campaign that went on with the women's lib movement. But anyways, so he just advertised a bunch of stuff around this fictitious story that we've been told. I'm not saying that slavery didn't exist, but it definitely wasn't the narrative that we've been given. So you start this rumor and you invent all kinds of phony stuff into newspapers, and which I'll show you as well. But so then you get $1.3 million for this museum. So once you have the museum there, it's there it is, locked stock, two smoking pew-pews. But yeah, and then you what is it? You have multi-million other deals to start building this fictitious fraud called Africatown. So they got $2.5 million on the second museum. And this is the list that they found on the first one. Search is the name of the company that was supposedly saying that they were going to bring up Clotilda. So, here. As Clotilda was search cannot identify 1BA70 as Clotilda with 100% certainty, as no single diagnostic artifact is found. Such artifact, I can't read the other one, man. On the way there. Ooh. Waka of Life. Shit, what's up, Waka? What you doing, fam? I was just showing off some check this out. You coming up, bro? This is one of the manifests. Oh, there he comes. Yes, sir. Waka.
Brother Nagual.
How you doing, brother?
Yes. Yeah, beautiful, brother. Hey, most high favored blessings, my brother.
I'm all ears.
Yeah, most high favored blessings, brother. And my noble.
Are you what?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, most high favored blessings, my noble.
Oh, okay, that was your greeting, though. I'm unfamiliar with your greeting, but I'm becoming familiar with it. Nice to see you, brother.
Yeah, kia ora, kia ora.
Kia ora, that's right.
Yeah, kia ora is health and well-beings. Greetings.
Yeah, I remember that, but I want to cement these passages in my head so that when I come into contact with another indigenous and they greet me with those greetings, I'd like to have something to say in response.
Yeah. Hey, so what do you got going over here?
Oh, this is geez, it's horrible right now. So, are you familiar with the have you ever heard of the Clotilda?
Clotilda?
Yes, it's a slave ship.
Oh no.
So this is there was this amazing story that went on like what's his name, Anderson Cooper. They did a number on it, but there was the name of this slave ship that supposedly the most documented account of any slaves, and it was an illegal slave ship that brought slaves after the 1806 period, where they outlawed slaves, and there was all kinds of accounts. The captain's log say 125 people were brought over, but all the recent accounts say 110. So they did like a whole expose on it, and they said that they found the remains of this old slave ship because there's not really any remains of any slave ships found anywhere to substantiate the slave narrative that we've been given. So this is Eric Colenius is one of the reporters, and the company that was hired to substantiate the slave ship is called Search, and this is the log of everything they found, allegedly found, that was Clotilda, which is to say they found nothing that could substantiate the Clotilda ship.
Right. And
So
is this like a log here?
Yes. So what I've done multiple posts on the entire news coverage of the so-called slave ship that is Clotilda. I've done a heavy deep dive into investigating its substance, and there seems to be nothing to give it substance, which was kind of surprising to me.
So the records are just gone. There's nothing left.
Yeah. So what I was stating a little earlier, right before you jumped in, was that there's this town called Plateau, Alabama, which there's been a movement within the last 15 years they've already changed the name from Plateau to Africatown. And so before they changed it to Africatown, there was a lot of heavy YT investors coming in behind the scenes, not being noticed, and they started investing money into changing this place into Africatown. And so in order to substantiate this Africatown, they had to give some type of historical account that would substantiate that title. So what I'm asserting here is that they've developed a fictitious framework of this so-called last slave ship ever, and it got massive amount of mainstream news coverage, so that for this one ship that was found in 2018, they brought up some scraps, literally scraps of wood and some rusted nails, put them in glass cases, and got $1.3 million to build a museum. And so after further investigation, it was found that it was erroneous. So they were in a rush to try to substantiate another ship, and in 2020 they brought up some more scraps of some other wood of some other ship and got $2.5 million to build another museum. And I went through that investigation, and none of it is panning out. But at this point, now the news is running with it saying like, oh, well, it's about the people now. It's not about the ship anymore. So they're literally taking money from, quote, Black indigenous people here in the United States to substantiate a fake slave ship that never existed, to support a fake narrative so that they could make money off of all indigenous people or Black people in the background.
Oh, wow. Isn't that nice?
It's the same shit that's happening over in England, what we were talking about last time. You know what I'm saying? With the crown and their throne.
Yes.
It's fucking nuts, bro.
Yeah, this is definitely this is manufactured terror.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally G-side on paper.
Oh, man. Yeah. Aren't they good at, they must be very creative when they come up with these narratives.
The
revenue collecting.
They're masters at it. I mean, I just released a post about have you ever heard of the deity Quetzalcoatl?
Oh, okay. Yep. Yes.
Okay, so that my last name.
You mean to be a time traveler or something?
Well, okay, see that's a positive.
Right.
Popular narratives, but so my last name is literally Espiri Quetzal, so half of Quetzalcoatl. So it took me 12 years to start at the most recent literature and work my way backwards to develop the substance that came to be Quetzalcoatl. I say it like that. Quetzalcoatl is the actual pronunciation, but
It's a go.
yeah, thank you. Yes, perfect. That was exactly it. So, um, so I found all the literature. I had to go back to 1541, Arte de la Lengua de Mexicana España, and then the second mention was in 1547. Then eventually 1782, the 1856, I believe, and then it came to the one that actually. So there was all these depictions from the first one that looked nothing like a plumed serpent, which was the narrative, and then there was the feathered serpent. But all the first 5 depictions had nothing to do with feathers or serpents. It was just some drawings that were put into books that were published by YT people, and eventually,
Nice
yeah,
art.
exactly. There was even some sculptures that looked nothing like plumed serpents, nothing. So I had to basically substantiate the entire historical literature, to show that they eventually created this mythical character to mirror the YT Jesus, so that my people would passively worship their culture instead of honoring our own.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, nice G-side story.
Another one. It's funny, like thanks to cats like yourself and like we're getting so interested now that we're not willing to settle for anything less but the actual going through the entire history to verify for ourselves.
It's coming to the fore, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, we're so fortunate to be able to have our oral history. We're so fortunate for that kind of stuff. They don't stop trying to pull the wool over our eyes. So I can imagine how much more they would have got away with it if we didn't know our oral history.
They're doing everything they can to discredit that with genetic records.
But it always, when they try and do that stuff, it ends up biting them back in the backside.
Agreed.
So we love it. I love it. Just like, yeah, we keep going because you continue to further validate our position.
Exactly. Every lie begins with truth at some point. Otherwise, there would be no point for the lie.
Yeah, and I love it because they start with their narrative and then they get to a dead end, right?
Yeah.
There's no way to go after that, right? And then they have to abandon their narrative.
Yeah. At one point, I remember there was a time where when I began my research around 2008. It started really picking up around 2010, and I just remember imagining to myself, wouldn't it be just amazing if everyone is so competitive at everything else that is like superfluous. It doesn't matter. But wouldn't it be great if at some point we became competitive at research and history, and then about a year ago, I came onto TikTok and started running into people that were interested in similar subjects as I was. And then I see them on lives debating every day now. And I'm like, people are so interested, like they're building logs and large caches of documents in their own phones like I do. And here it is. We're finally at that point where now people are so pissed that they're just like, I'm not taking anyone's word for it. I'm going to go do it myself.
Yes, we've been lied to.
Yeah, we've got to that point. We're just fed up with it. We're like, no, I'm going to go figure it out, and then nobody can tell me. And then they start figuring out what's really going on, because it's like at the beginning of mine, I was like, I remember talking to somebody and thinking like, we had a great conversation and we left. I wasn't even involved in research at this point, but we left the club, and I went back home and I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to look up what we were talking about because I was full of shit in that conversation. So I'm wondering if they were full of shit. And then I went and researched what we were talking about. I was like, holy shit, I'm a moron. And that person was a moron. Yet we walked away feeling like fulfilled, as though we had communicated something. It was just completely empty. There was no purpose to it. We were just filling space.
Yeah, just having some small talk.
Yeah, literally. I mean, it was like nothing talk. But then I transposed that across the planet. I'm like, how many people are doing this every day? We come together, we talk, and we just bullshit each other into believing that it's like a mutual psychosis.
Yeah, you're talking crap.
Yep.
It's a form of conditioning. We're conditioning each other.
Exactly. And we walk away like feeling like we accomplished something. It's like, how much more useless could we be? Or actually, we're useless to our own selves in our cultures, but completely useful to YT's culture.
Yes. Isn't it interesting? If we actually do exactly what they've been doing, right? Let's say if we follow their own actions, right, just inside of that, right, how they've used these logs, they've fished up these wood out of the water, and then they've used it to justify building a museum or whatever. But if we follow that narrative, we'd have a lot of buildings.
No shit. Like we'd have complete cities, almost like New York.
And they'll be built on truth, and this will what the difference will be.
Yeah, man. That oh god. I've seen like there was Anderson Cooper on this Clotilda thing. They showed divers. They were paid $2.2 million, this search team, to go find these ships. And I'm like, so they show this team going out on a boat in a river with some like I forget the sonic type technology that uses sound waves in water, and they're going out there. They show a diver go down with this full scuba. Then they cut to Anderson Cooper and the diver in an interviewing room, and he's like, the diver's going into this whole thing. He's like, I could literally, he's like, it was like a spiritual experience to me. I went down there and I could feel the 110 slaves in the hull of that ship. And I was watching with the complete cache of literature that on the entire subject. So I was reading through the code, and I'm like, and Anderson Cooper stops and says, he's like, are you serious? And the guy's like, oh yeah. He's like, I could feel the spirits of the 110 ancestors. And I'm like, they're talking about that fake slave ship that they got $1.3 million to build that museum. So this black dude is on there talking about spirits that weren't even, it wasn't even the ship, but the whole melodrama was being conducted, in front of me. And I'm just like, for anyone that's not remotely interested in verifying what we're being shown, they would have just followed that narrative and gone along with it.
Exactly. This is interesting, eh? They can get all this funding, have documentaries, and that's a lot of money.
A lot.
Back through down there over a piece of wood or a made-up story. It's interesting.
I watched 3 documentaries, very long documentaries, and out of all 3 of them, I made a post. On the third one, there's a group of like 5 quote black people standing in front of these containers that have rusted nails, literally pieces, like some shards of wood, and they're talking. They're like, we're probably the only people that have ever stood in front of their slave ships. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, I've watched all 3 of these documentaries, and I haven't seen a ship yet. and here's these people standing in front of scraps of wood and rusted nails, and saying that they're standing in front of a slave ship. I was like, the documentary, the millions of dollars that went into it, they could have at least built a mock slave ship. But what they did is they set up this little net, like mini fence in the middle of this green grass park to emulate the size of the hole. And then they have these
Oh,
black people walk into this thing and then talk about how they're like, this is so crammed, it would be like, can you imagine 110 people in here? Just after they went through the literal logs of the captain, who stated that there was 125 slaves that he bought, but they're talking 110. And I'm like, this is a documentary here, like as in documentation, but nothing that they were showing had any substance. I was just so floored.
those 15 missing people, they must have been the crew.
And then the final story of this is, which was also not substantiated. They said that he took this ship in the middle of the night after bringing these slaves back from, a 2-month journey on the Atlantic. And he comes into Alabama, sneaks by the whatever guard on the river. And in order to cover up his tracks, because you could literally get unalived by hanging back then for, importing slaves. So in order to cover his tracks, he goes to a friend's property, offloads the slaves, who couldn't have been worth, more than $100 a piece at that point, and decides to pour fuel on his, $15,000 boat, and in the middle of the night, light his boat on fire to cover up his tracks so that he wouldn't get hung. I'm like, so you're telling me he decides to show off a fireworks display in the middle of Alabama in the middle of the night, when he could have just easily got rid of the slaves and kept his boat?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, bro.
I will just do a bonfire in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah. I'm like, I was laughing my ass off. I'm like, and people are eating this up. I was just, it was horrible.
Well, it's not what you want to do when you want to conceal something.
Exactly. And then when they go through the Congressional Records Office, they send a team after all this stuff. Eric Colonius, that's the author's name. Jeez. He goes out to investigate the story, and they call the Congressional Records Office of whatever, and they have no. So apparently the captain, he was found out and brought to court. So all of this started from a bet, allegedly. So he said, I bet you I could put my life at risk by going to Africa to bring back slaves at a point where slavery was illegal. Put my life at risk, risk my boat and everything, just for a bet for, I think it was like $1 or something like that. And I was like, so this whole thing was brought up from a friendly wager. And after this whole ordeal, they come back and they can't find any records in the Alabama ship logs. There's no, so all the periodicals that gave substance to this so-called slave ship, they were all fabricated they're trying to say that they pulled a hoax on the people who wanted to abolish slavery. I was like, there's just nothing to it. Every place I went, it was just more empty bullshit. Like this periodical up here, front page, 1890 article, supposed interview. Yeah, this is just one part of it. I also have there's a big interview by some lady who was a huge author of folktale at that point. There's a guy named Cujo Lewis, who's like the main guy. But so he was actually on the Clotilda. But I kept asking myself this question: if I was African and I was stolen from Africa, brought onto a ship, crossed over the Atlantic for 2 months, showed up in Alabama, got off the ship, and then that slave captain lit his ship on fire, I have one haunting question. How would I know the name of the ship? I don't know English. I speak only African, some dialect that no one's ever heard of. So if I got off the ship, how could I possibly know the name of this ship? It doesn't make sense. I'm like, I got off the ship and what did I read Braille? You know, I took a picture of it. Even if even if some English captain around me said Clotilda, I wouldn't know what Clotilda is. I would have no way to discern through my comprehension and linguistics that they're talking about a ship, that they're talking about anything that has to do with me. I'm just an African taken from, Senegal or some shit. It's all full of shit. What's this other? Oh, jeez, I can barely say let's speak. Yeah, some of y'all down there should come up, man. I'm sure I'm barely touching the surface of. I'm sure other people know what I'm talking about. Where else do I got some? Oh, Captain Mayher, there it is. I gotta shrink these down. Hold up. Here we go. Exhibit C. Newspaper sentence stating that. What is that? Commotion? Oh, and excitement. However, if you try to find evidence of all this excitement and commotion in the newspapers of the day, you can't find any. While newspapers all over the country were covering every moment of the African slave trade and every incursion in coastline, there are no stories about a slave ship named Clotilda. Yeah, all of them are fabricated. So they're saying that the guys who were doing the illegal slave trade at that time were entering these accounts into the periodicals by calling them in themselves, which sounds very suspect in its own. Oh man, what's going on here? Do you guys hear much about slave trade over there, Awaka?
They were mostly coming here when they got here. It was mostly Australia where those slave ships were going. But mind you, no, they weren't slave ships. They were bringing the convicts across from England and Ireland and dropping them off in Australia. They were coming here mostly for trade, but they did practice the blackbirding.
See, I've heard about the convicts narrative as well. They use the same thing over here in the United States, but I'm not buying it at this point. Like what I've written my own literature on this myself, but my own interpretations of the common narratives that we've all been given, and I'm like, why would, if you didn't want somebody in your society, especially with these people's histories, why would you spend all this money to build boats, sail them, put it at risk, put your investments at risk, and then ship them literally across the planet to get rid of them. I mean, that's just a covert form of colonization. They could give us those narratives, but I don't buy that shit. Purple diamond. But I remember seeing you. Yeah, how many of you down there think the same thing about this narrative? Like they shipping their unwanteds, their criminals across the planet. I'm like, nah, man. This was a military operation under the covert disguise of, you know, unwarranteds and paupers, and then they wrote it into history as such so that they could cover their tracks. It's like the same thing as like a Columbus quote being sent off to discover some shit. I'm like, for spices? You're gonna send it. First of all, I can't find any primaries. That's another weird thing. I can't find primaries on Christopher Columbus ever sailing, which is some weird shit. Like, go Google. What are there any primaries to Columbus setting foot in coming to the Americas? It'll say no. The only quote so-called primaries are from Bartolomé de las Casas in 18. What is it? It was 1809 or something like that. Where so Bartolomé de las Casas rendition was supposedly a summarization of Columbus's journals, but they happened to pop up. No shit. 300 years later is when Bartolomé de las Casas' so-called journals came into fruition. Yeah, they came to light. They found them 300 years later. I'm like, how do you find primaries 300 years later? And I have a great scholar on here TikTok. His name is Sam. If you got a chance, go follow him. Samuel Hiluito, or he goes by Samuel C, but Samuel H. Hiluito. An amazing scholar, an amazing researcher. Seriously, like I can't speak highly enough about him. He recently went and found what he calls primaries of Columbus's journals, but they're in a museum in Spain. And they're not the primaries. I forget the word that they use, but it's used as a substitution for primaries. But they have what looks to be like handwritten journals. But I'm like, if that is the primary, why is Google saying that it's not? There's no primaries, and why aren't there copies of that primary existent and rampant all over the planet? I mean, Columbus's story is literally the world's most famous explorer because of his endeavors here to the Americas. So how could the entire planet be under the spell of knowing about this guy and his voyages that there are no primaries for? I mean, that just goes to show the level of indoctrination that we all suffer, myself included. I didn't think to bother to verify Columbus's journeys until about 3 years ago. And I'm going to toot my own horn here. I'm one of the best researchers that I know, and I'm that stupid. Like, I'm literally that dumb. So if I'm that good and I'm literally that dumb, that means everybody else has to be as stupid as me.
Yeah, well, we don't know everything, and we're still learning.
Yeah,
there's a whole lot more to learn and know.
Absolutely. Something to think about for everybody down there. It's like, it's so interesting to know that like, again, I'm one of the best I know, and it took me like 5 years ago. I've said it countless times in my life. That's a fact. That's a fact. What I'm saying is factual. But when I looked
Mm,
into the etymological denotative definition of fact, it was 1530s. Go look it up
mm,
yourself. Evil, deed, and crime. So anytime I stated, no, slavery is a fact, or COVID is a fact, that's one of my favorite facts to claim. COVID is a fact. Now, if I plug in my more informed comprehension, if I say COVID is a fact, COVID is an evil deed and a crime.
yes, absolutely. There was another fake, false narrative that they played out on all of us, and it's legal, right? Legal unaliving.
Absolutely,
It
brother.
continues. It just continues today. We're all affected by it. They've stepped it up, eh? Even for us that never got that needle, they've stepped it up and they've put it in the food. It's in the food in the supermarkets. And then it's in those chemtrails now. It's in the cloud seeding. It's in this other poison that they're raining down on our lands, our waters, our bushlands, all the living creatures there. And that narrative is the false narrative is it's called rodent control.
Yeah. Well, that's not necessarily false.
Well, if you identify as a rodent,
Oh my god. Or if you're assigned the identity of a rodent.
exactly, dirty rat.
Oh my god. What's the royalties name? I forget their names. But
The Windsors, the fake Windsors.
the one, okay, so one of them actually, he said that he would, his unaliving bed, his one of his last quotes, he said that if he wished he could be reincarnated, because if he could, he would come back as a VIRUS to, no joke, he would come back as a VIRUS to quell the population.
Mm.
I was like, what kind of wish is that? Like, who the hell? Some guys are like 7 wives, like some guys are like
I'm finishing off my father's legacy.
Exactly. I mean, I'm like, what? I mean, that's the weirdest wish. I mean, I could think of all kinds of crazy stuff that I would come up with. None of them would be to be a VIRUS and come back to stabilize the populations. Oh.
Yeah. I don't know who appointed that guy God.
Oh my god.
Yeah, but he can stay where he is.
Man, those families, bro, they got
they got some weird ideas. And that's what happens when you're inbred.
Yeah, I mean, oh my god, it's the same thing of like someone asked. There came a point where I asked every person I possibly could. I was like, I asked myself the question: where did this idea of love come from? That I have in my head, like, how did it get here? How does anybody have any ideas? So I went around for about a year and a half asking every single person I knew, can you tell me?
Emotion.
Yeah, I was like, can you tell me the first time that you remember hearing about the construct of love? Like nobody, not a single person could answer me. That was really weird.
It was well, it's an emotion that's from an organ, that responsible from an organ.
Well, I understand I know where you're going with it, and I agree, Walker. I do agree with what you're saying, but I'm saying the philosophical construct of the interpretation that we have in modern times, like the romanticized version of it. Um, the reason I think that what I found is that no one could come up with the answer because it's a construct that we all kind of assume culturally without knowing. The only reason I'm saying this is because I actually have a depiction of the first time that that word came into my consciousness. My family had been, my father had left. He went to a religious cult, and we were left. He had stole my mother's children. They had just had twins, and so he stole them and took off. And so we were like left with no food, no money. So my mother had to go to these things called the Salvation Army. They're like a
Yes, we've got that here.
yeah. Okay, so that's actually where a lot of it began. Is when I looked into the history, a lot of it started in Australia and near those regions. And so
Mm.
when we went there, I had no idea what was going on. All I knew is that we were a broken family, and that while we were having, that we went there to eat basically, and in order to do so, we had to get involved in these little like artist type of little participation rituals. And so they put on they gave me a plaque of wood. They took a picture of me, and I had to write on the piece of wood next to my picture that they laminated, Jesus. I actually spelled it Jesus because I didn't know how to spell Jesus, but it said, Jesus loves me. And that was the first time. I know for a fact that that was the first time because it's actually my mom still has the little plaque. And it wasn't until 2016 that I went through the entire history of what is now known as the modern interpretation of love that came from an era called the troubadours during the Victorian age. And a lot of the poets and stuff, they're scholars with all this time to philosophize and pontificate on these new constructs that they were recording in literature, that they had the time to do so. And the only reason they had the time to do so is because they had servants all over the place that were serving them so that they didn't have to take care of themselves, so that they could sit around and have leisure time while our people were the ones who served them globally.
Yeah.
The Salvation Army was literally responsible. They were literally going to Australia and taking children away from their parents, raising them in their own, indoctrinating them, breaking up the families. These religious belief practitioners, they were the ones responsible.
Generation.
Yeah. They were. I told you my father joined a religious cult. So because of their religions, my father decided to leave our family and steal my mother's newborn twins. So here they are literally breaking up my family, and then we have nowhere to go. So we go to them. Mm. And my mother always attributed her thanks to them. He gave thanks and praise to them because they helped us during those times, but they were literally the ones responsible for breaking up our family.
Yes. Unreal, eh?
Fucking crazy.
It's like they did a false flag event. That wasn't a false flag event. It's just unreal. They do the problem, reaction, solution. They've created their problem.
Yeah.
Clean the right response, and next minute they've got the answer.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
Beautifully sculpted.
If you watch that rabbit-proof fence.
Oh yes, man.
That movie.
Incredibly impactful.
Oh, yeah. Could you imagine that was only like 1% of the real story?
Yeah, yeah.
It was a
I'll
watered
never
down version.
I'll never forget when they were giving the presentation, literally describing how they're trying to weed out the color of the children, the Aboriginals,
Mm.
scientifically.
And those women that had those babies to those white men, they were forced. They didn't choose to have those men as partners. Those men helped themselves.
The,
Like that wasn't consented, right? A relationship.
yeah, the image of the women hitting themselves over the head with rocks never left my mind.
Mm. And look at that, how they portrayed them, like they were subhuman. That was rubbish. They painted a narrative like these people, they know nothing. They're just dummies. They're idiots. Right? They wouldn't know how to catch anything, feed themselves, look after themselves. Like that was a wrong narrative. That just painting them in this next light. They're below human.
What's even more fascinating is that the same narrative continues today. It's just that people don't understand its process, to the subjugation, to the conditioning of submission that we volunteer ourselves for. As a matter of fact, our parents will actually, demean us and reprimand us for not participating in these, cultural rituals that are like, in the schools of today. The same thing happens. Like we go to a school where 20 or 25 of us sit over here at desks, and it's just assumed that we are clueless. We know nothing. And the one person up in front, they know everything.
Yes.
And we carry that on for 12 years compulsively, and then we literally pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to continue that tradition, to achieve status and payment to sustain our lives at higher education.
And we listen to the one authority at the front. We line up like good slaves. We wait for the bell to ring, and we get into a uniform. It's all military training.
1837, Horace Mann, the father of education, developed from the Prussian model of 8-year school, which is known as modern day Germany. Where it was literally responsible for creating loyal subjects to the king.
Yep, absolutely. That's why they were threatened when they came down here. They saw something. And that's why they couldn't do what they did to us everywhere else, mind you. They tried to war against us and they lost on the battlefield. So we were quite fortunate. We were very good at setting up our structures, especially around mountains. And we always had an escape route going out the back. So our fortresses, and they were very strategic, our fortresses. They were a snare. We used to build snares and traps and trenches, and areas were sectioned off. You could only go through an area at a time, and then you had to go underground and come back, and then you're into the next section. And can you imagine going around that in a mountain? You know, just keep spiraling around that mountain to all the way to the top, and it's all sectioned out. And then there's advantage points for the hosts of that mountain, of that fortress, for each section. So yeah, we were just fortunate. And then we had protocols for war, for fighting. So yeah, they were definitely threatened when they came here, and it's just like most of our indigenous cultures all over the world. Wherever they went, they came across our indigenous peoples of those lands, and they were threatened because it was different to their societies, opposite. We were egalitarian style communities and societies. And never about this competition against each other. It was always about looking after each other.
Yeah, even the philosophical construct of opposites was foreign. It was nowhere near our cultures.
And ownership. We didn't own the land owned us, and we were one with the land. It ain't the other way around. We own it, and we came from it. So it is us, and we are it.
You know, once you delineate the your so-called once you create the construct of a god, it now becomes a delineation of fictitious entity that's drawn from the ethers. There's nowhere to observe God. There's nowhere to point to and say that's your God. It's like ours was like there was no God. It was like literally what we're looking at, what we are, the tree, the whatever, the antelope, the gazelle, the sloth, the bird, extension of ourselves.
Yes, and well, if we had a god figure, well, so in our culture, we always had a one supreme being in our oral history, which related to our creation story. So it's very interesting how we had all that knowledge, one supreme creator, and then below that is the 12 heavens, and below that is the celestials, and then below that is Mother Earth, the physical realm. But in our narrative is our Mother Earth is the land bridge to the celestial, being the rainbow. So we had a rainbow bridge, and the Mother Earth forms that rainbow bridge into the celestial. So that was our connection. And then the celestial is the bridge into the 12 heavens. So that story we never lost that story. We still have it. And obviously we got called evil and wicked for that story. And, and it's not very long ago that the biblical scholars have now aligned our creation story with the Genesis story.
I've heard similar stories and that have been created in my people's culture, and I'm not trying to. I would never. I mean, obviously, I would never demean anybody else's creation story, but it was your explanation behind it that was intriguing to me. Like you said, that there was this one and below that, and then below that, and below that. So
Mm.
that would be the hierarchical philosophical construct that we've been given to interpret it. And I'm saying in my culture that would be
Mm.
the Eurocentric interpretation and explanation of how uh, cultural construction went. So that when you have a one, so my people are there historically have been attributed as creating the number zero, which is a very
Mm.
unique number. Uh, the zero has three simultaneous definitions, where it's a number, it's a symbol that represents all numbers and the absence of itself. So once you have a zero, which is where you start, like you said, Earth, which would represent a zero, like a circle or a cyclical, and then
We call that te kore.
tekore.
Like how you say, yeah, that's how you say zero.
Oh,
But yeah, this is our te kore. So
and
we've got
so
the sinde.
the Sunday.
The te kore is nothingness.
Ah. So once you create a one, the one is a delineation of the whole. So if you take a zero and you create a one, you draw a line from the top down to its bottom. Now it's a delineation. So now we have a binary interpretation, which causes hierarchical comprehension. So in my people's culture, there wouldn't be any, the hierarchy would be horizontal rather than hierarchical. There are what could
Yes,
become
correct.
what could be comprehended as, it could be looked upon as a hierarchical construction, but as I'm sure with yours, like there would be, if Westerner would have come to my people's culture, they would have seen a hierarchy, but our hierarchies we're not set up in the same fashion as theirs. In my people's
Do
culture,
they have names?
in my people's culture,
Mm.
um,
Do they have names?
I'm removed from my language, so I wouldn't. But I can tell you this from what my plants tell me is that with what would be seen as the chief or the king was a completely different nature, where the king was absolute servitude of the community. So it's in the Western regard, the community served the king, but not in our culture.
Subjects.
Yeah, yeah.
Goes the other way. Mm. We're all subjected. Oh, we're all subjects of the creation.
Yes. So in my people's culture, it's like there's this deity called the Quetzalcoatl, who was actually, that's like an ancient name for like a PhD kind of, but that PhD's complete practice would be a servitude to. So he was able to map the stars. He had a vision from the skies to the surface and below surface. So everything that the quote king or the shaman would be in practice of would be to serve the community. It's like absolute service of the community, would rather than sitting there in some position to where everyone's just in servitude. That's just ridiculous. It's like, and somehow yet that's what we're all. I mean,
It's
even right.
so different.
Yeah. I mean, even right now, we're in like I could claim to be indigenous all day, and I uniquely do have an indigenous practice, but it took me years to get there. But the truth of the matter is, I serve corporate, presidents. I mean, like I pay with dollars that say "In God We Trust." I went to schools that began as churches. I
Bit
was
of a corporation.
yeah. I mean, I was literally a Catholic altar boy. I held a Bible on my head for the priest to read. Like I couldn't be any less indigenous, for the larger portion of my life.
Would it be a lectern?
I think somebody sent a little kitty. I don't know what those things mean, but I wanted to thank you because I know that was what people. I still don't know what these like gifts are. I've never given a gift because I don't know the process of giving a gift. strangely enough.
It's a gift box down on the right side,
So,
bottom right.
yeah. So what is the?
You bring
Do
it
I
up. You
have?
just
How do
push
you
on
know
that
if you
gift
have?
box.
How do you know if you have gifts to give?
You push on that box down in the right corner.
Yeah.
It'll tell you, and then have a look when you click on that icon, and when it comes up, you'll see all the gifts that come up, and then have a look down in the right corner. It'll tell you your balance if you have anything.
Oh, whoa. I have. Well,
You might say recharge.
yeah. It says first recharge offer. So how do you know if you got anything?
Well, it'll say a number, but because it's saying recharge, you don't have anything.
Okay. Because I think people have given me gifts. So where would my gifts go if
You see the coin number inside of your. You have a look on your icon.
yeah.
See the coin number? Yeah, there.
Okay, it says